Hi, I'm Belinda Sunshine. Welcome to yet another program of When We Were Young. And if you're wondering who is so special today in my studio, well, he's someone very, very special indeed. I won't tell you who, so keep on watching. Born in 1945, Matthew Tan grew up listening to his uncle's country music collection. He grew fond of country music and admired country icons like Hank Williams, Marty Robbins, and Kenny Rogers. At the age of 15, Matthew started playing the guitar, which he would borrow from his friends, as he couldn't afford one. When Matthew finished school in 1961, he formed a band named Matthew and the Mandarins. They started playing part-time gigs in local hotels. In 1965, they became a full-time band. In 1969, the band's popularity grew as they backed up local pop legend Anita Sarawak on her EP With a Lot of Soul. In 1974, they released an album on Live Records with songs such as Louisiana Man and Snakes Crawl at Night. In 1975, Matthew flew to the United States of America, where he got the opportunity to work with Western artists on radio and television. He became the first Asian ever to sing at the haloed Grand Ole Opry, performing a duet with the legendary Skeeter Davis. In 1978, a self-titled EP, Matthew and the Mandarins, was released by EMI. By September that year, it had sold 5,000 copies. With the recognition from the EP, the band was invited to take part in the International Music Festival at Oklahoma. Their biggest hit was Singapore Cowboy, which hit triple platinum status, eventually with more than 30,000 copies sold, and was featured on the EP Matthew and the Mandarins. The song would eventually earn Matthew the Asia Pacific Lifetime Achievement Award at the Canberra Country Blues and Roots Festival in 2014. In 1979, the group was no longer with EMI but had signed with WEA. Over their music career, the band had played in countries like Canada, Hong Kong, Indonesia, Japan, and many more. The band continued to perform well into the current millennium. And though it has been several years since they last played live, their legacy is secured. And today, we have the opportunity to feature them on our show. Thank God I'm a country girl. Hee-haw! You know, country music has always been with me ever since I was a little girl too. And of course, none other than the country man himself. He called himself a Singapore cowboy. So let's put our hands together for Matthew Tan of the Mandarins.
Hi, nice being here.
Yeah, so cool, you know, to
Thank you.
really see you in person in our
Thank you.
studio. But what I'm wondering is that, Matt, what got you into music?
Well, I had uncles and my dad. They love music and they used to play gramophone records, the 78 RPM. And those days they were playing songs like Frankie Lane, Cool Water, and Hank Williams, Cheating Heart, and all that. And I grew up listening to all those type of music, and it got into me. But I did not know it was country music. They call it cowboy music that day, And so as I grew older, I was so into music that I decided to join a band or start a band, more for fun than as a living. And that's how I got into the music thing. And luck, I was very fortunate, and the timing and luck is that you got to have that, And I had a lot of met a lot of people who were in the industry, the F&B industry, the hotel industry, and we were performing in Singapore Island Country Club, SICC, lunch, dinner, and all that. And the Kutek Puat group, the G group, had people members who are there who attend the lunches and the dinners, and they heard us, they liked us, and then they asked us, would you like to perform at one of their hotels? And that was actually a private hotel that was catering to the GIs that was fighting in Vietnam, coming for R&R in Singapore. The hotel is called Shelford Hotel, but it belongs to the G group. And the MD and the general manager for the Shelford Hotel was a man who was also the managing director of Goodwood Park Hotel. And he liked us very much. We started actually playing barbecue for the GIs once a week. Then it got to twice. And then eventually it got to be regular 6 nights a week. And then from there he says, how about you going to do 1 hour at the Goodwood? They actually have a combo band playing for dance and shows and all that. They want us to go there and inject a little bit of country and rock and roll and oldies, So we say, okay, extra money, why not? So we went and we play in Shelford Hotel, and then we went to the Goodwood Park, the Arundel Room, the ballroom, big ballroom, and we did 1 hour there. And gradually it graduated. We graduated from in that, and then we started performing in all the G groups hotels. Even the Singapore Lady, the riverboat, yeah. So that's how I got hooked into that.
Well, I'm sure you people out there know that, the group became so famous after 1965. And then they start, what? They started a record, right? You cut a record?
What is it?
A record, the record?
Yes.
Yeah, like what we've got here.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think, your biggest break was when you went to Nashville.
Yes.
And from Nashville, you wrote that very famous song, Singapore Cowboy, right?
Yes, when I went to Nashville, I met a lot of great singers. I met and especially a producer of, his name is Owen Bradley. He produces Loretta Lynn, Conway Twitty, Brenda Lee, and I went to see him. Actually, I went to see him hoping for him to sign me on, And he told me, he says, the only way that anybody who wants to get into the music industry is to write their own songs. I never wrote any song at all. I mean, I only sing cover versions of all that I have heard, And he told me that, he said, or else, he says, if you expect someone to write a good song for you, they won't give you because you are unknown. So he says people like Elvis or Conway Twitty, they will get all the songwriters writing for them because they are automatic million sellers, So he says, doing cover versions, you will not get anywhere. So I started thinking. Then at that time, I was working part-time at a hotel in the front desk with a guy who is also a songwriter. In Nashville, everybody is a songwriter.
Okay.
And they're trying to pitch a song, And we were talking about, music, writing songs. And I told him my life story and how I got into country music and how I came to Nashville. Then he went home. The next day he came with the words Singapore Cowboy, but exactly my life story in 2 verses. And I was so taken by it. I sat down and I went to my room and I wrote music to it.
Yep.
And that's how it became. But then in Nashville, no one knows about me. I don't sing, and then no one asks. I came back to Singapore, and a lot of my American friends, my Singapore friends, and at the Shangri-La Hotel where I was performing, they kept asking, "Hey, we heard that you wrote a song in Nashville. Let's hear it." Then I said, "No, nobody would like, because cowboy Singapore has no cowboys first and foremost. They will think that they relate cowboy to people who ride horse and cow punchers, but my cowboy was not about that, because at that time when I was in Nashville, I wrote that song. Rhinestone Cowboy was the #1 hit for Glenn Campbell. And Rhinestone Cowboy also is not about a cow puncher.
Yeah.
It is actually about a musician, songwriter. I've been walking the streets singing the same old songs,
Yep.
Then the reference was cowboy means you are a songwriter, a musician, a country singer. So that's how I say,
cool.
if they have a rhinestone, why not a Singapore? So
Okay.
then I sang at the Shangri-La a couple of times, and EMI heard about it, and then we were actually recording an album, and the producer Reggie Verghese, he says, "Matthew, you're Singapore Cowboy, why don't you record it?" I said, "No, nobody will like it. And Singapore, the whole of Singapore knows there's no cowboys in Singapore, So and he insisted, he says, it's better you do it. So I just chucked one song into the album, and lo and behold, actually, I was surprised that it went down well, because when I went into EMI studios and office, the A&R man, he showed me the chart, Radio Fusion chart, He says, "Matthew, your song is in a hit parade." I said, "Nah." I said, "You guys pay money to put it in, I said, payola,
Okay.
He says, "No, we have nothing to do with it,
Yep.
And it went in at #9.
Wow.
And I said, "I cannot believe that you guys never pull strings,
Okay, good. Now, to cut the story short, this song, Singapore Cowboy, had so much mass appeal. It was one of the top hits on the Singapore charts. That's the hit parade charts in Singapore. I was there playing the song, I remember. Now, that was way back in 1978, when I was really a newbie at that time. It was really good. But tell me, how did you feel, when it became so popular, it was really, wow, blown to like 50,000 copies that were sold.
Well, it was, I was just lucky, the timing, And it also got an Australian record producer and company. They liked it, and they asked EMI for the rights to release it in Australia, and
Wow.
it went there quite well there. I was very surprised because actually nobody believes that there's cowboys here, and people relate to the cowboy to cow punches.
Okay.
Yeah. So then Oklahoma, there's this Jim Halsey, who is the agency that manages the Oak Ridge Boys and a lot of people, in the industry, Don Williams and all that, and then they invited us to go and perform in Tulsa, Oklahoma,
Yep.
a music festival, and we were very fortunate. We went there and we performed with all the
Wow.
big stars, you know,
Yep.
and 20,000 people.
Oh,
I've
wow.
never performed in front of all this type of,
Okay.
you know, big audience. And then they brought the show to Nashville, actually in Oklahoma, and then to Nashville.
Okay.
They happened to have the World's Fair at Knoxville,
Okay.
Tennessee, which is just a short distance from Nashville. And the producers who were staging the show says, "Why don't you all go to the World Music Festival and perform?" So we went. You know, we had the Jordanaires singing with us.
Wow.
The Jordanaires, the Elvis Presley,
Elvis
the
Presley's
vocal
backup.
group, you know.
Yeah,
And we
singers.
sang. At that time, I did not sing Singapore Cowboy yet. I mean, I sang it, but I sang other songs. So we actually did the American Trilogy, you know, and
Okay.
with the Jordanaires backing. My goodness, even my own hair stood. I had a friend in Texas who knew somebody big, a banker, and he introduced me to him and said that, told him that I want to go to the Opry, Grand Ole Opry. And
So-
he met me and he
Yeah.
says, "Matthew, he got someone to bring me."
So you
And it
went.
was
Yeah.
an actor and a country and a cowboy actor. And he brought me not to the show itself, he brought me to backstage.
Yep.
You know, and backstage I met Dolly Parton, Loretta Lynn, you know, all these big time artists.
Wow.
These are all my heroes, you know,
Okay.
and I am here, a small bugger from Singapore, where? Some part of China.
Oh my
you know,
gosh.
so
Okay.
I was very fortunate, you know, I had a mingle with all these big time
Okay.
artists, and there was Skeeter Davis, and we got to be talking and we became friends.
Friends.
Yeah, and then
Yep.
a few years later, when
She
I came back,
to Singapore.
I opened up my own
Yep.
place,
Yep.
and I invited her to come and perform in my
Wow.
place,
Okay.
and
Good.
that's how it all started with Skeeter
Very good.
Davis,
Okay.
and then I brought in Freddie Fender too. And
Oh.
Freddie Fender, and in fact,
Before another teardrop falls.
in fact, one night we had
Yep.
two of them.
Wow.
You know,
Okay.
performing in my own restaurant. The reason I could afford them is because I bring them over to Singapore, and then I bring them over to Indonesia and Kuala Lumpur to sell, to cover my cost, because the
Freight.
air tickets
air
and
ticket.
you know, Skeeter Davis used to bring her band. Her band is 5-piece, and that's 5 air tickets is more than 10K, you know.
Okay.
And so I had to cover. I'm not a rich man, so
They would
I
say,
had
"No,
I had,
no."
I had to
Yeah,
cover
yeah,
myself,
yeah.
you know. So I sell Skeeter to Indonesia. I sell Skeeter to Merlin Hotel in Kuala Lumpur, and get all that to cover myself. And then because she liked Singapore so much, the people loved her so much. Then I talked her. I said, "Skeeter, you don't bring your band next time." I say, "We back you."
Good.
And
good, good.
I said, "What your band does, we do everything the same, you know."
You did it better.
Yeah.
Correct? Yeah, as you all know, it became so popular, the outfit, the Mandarins.
Yes,
Okay?
thank you.
They cut altogether 3 albums, mind you, and they sold so many copies. I can't remember how many, close to 100,000 copies, And of course, Singapore Cowboy is the number one, where they really put the sing in Singapore. Now, actually, those days when you were performing, what was the audience like? Do they enjoy what you do? Do they like all that?
Actually, when you are performing and on stage, you don't think about all this,
Okay.
Actually, because my love for the music itself was so deep and a lot that I actually if you don't pay me, I still would like to sing.
Really?
You know,
Okay.
because if you don't love what you do, you will never enjoy. You will never be able to go far or be able to
Progress.
succeed. You know,
Yep, yep.
because in anything, not just music. You know, if there's no love at what you do,
Passion.
yes, you I don't think you can be successful.
Precisely.
I happen to be one of the lucky few who like what I do and make a living with it, you know, and everything falls into place, you know, luck, timing, all this comes into with a little bit of talent, with the timing and with your luck, you know.
Everything will be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but tell me, Matt, what is your biggest challenge, throughout this musical journey of yours?
You know, it's strange. I never thought about the challenge because, like I said, I was so buried into loving what I do. You know, people. My first gig was a house party, a birthday party for a lady. $30.
That was way back in the
To
60s.
me, it was
Yep.
it was fun, you know. We don't care, you know. We go there, we do what we love. We get to eat the good food and meet people, you know.
Okay.
So I mean, it was a win-win situation for me, and from there, you know, I guess I was very fortunate and timing and lucky. I met, like I said, I met the G group, and then they got us to the hotel, and then EMI, and slowly it went
Yeah.
boom.
Yeah, you're right. That's why you became
Yeah.
so famous.
Yeah.
Matthew and the Mandarins, imagine,
Thank you.
Okay, now tell me now, at this stage of your life, going forward, what do you plan to do, or what do you intend to do? What is the future for Matthew Tan?
You know, I'm not young, you know. And
Neither am
right
I.
now, Singapore music scene is actually not so
Vibrant?
lively and
Okay.
not so active. You know, you look at our, media, radio and TV and all that. They don't put a lot of music shows. It used to be in the early stage. You know, you had Pesta Pop, you had Pusparama, you had Serrado show, you had the POSB show. Nowadays, zero. You know, all they have is drama, comedians. You know, and so there's no airtime for musicians here in Singapore. You know, we actually have in Singapore a lot of very good established musicians. Over at, you just take for instance Jakarta, Indonesia and Malaysia, they have a lot of music programs, you know, and the musicians there, because of all these, they work hard, they try to get in all these things. But in Singapore, musicians, they work so hard. Where do they get a lounge, a club somewhere, and that's it, you know? And nowadays, it's worse. There's no place that you can. The only place is the Esplanade. The Esplanade will only put in when you are of some renown.
Yes.
You know, if you
Status, yes. Yeah.
are not there, they put you in the lobby type of thing. You know, where you sing for free,
Okay.
no money,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
no gallery, just people standing around watching you. You know, and same. It's all boils down to
Okay.
the happening, like, you know.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Singapore is not happening. But for us at this stage, for me, you know, I have already reached my peak, and then I'm already almost going to retire already. I'm almost 80 years old, you know, and
Yep.
also physically not so fit, you
Mm.
know, walking with a walking stick and all that, you know, because there's no and because COVID also happened and there was no live performances for 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all my musicians they scattered. They went to do other jobs. So now to get back together is not easy, and there's also not much to do. Though no hotels. If I go to a lounge in a club, they think that you're too old, you know. We want somebody younger, and then you know my group has no girls. We are all guys,
Okay.
and somehow it doesn't sound
Attract.
attractive for them. You know, they
Okay.
always do you have a girl singer? No, sorry, you know. You know,
Really? Uh-huh.
they somehow want you know something to you know to look at, you
Okay.
know, but that's it, you know. So for me it's just riding into the horizon
Like a cowboy.
quietly. Yes.
Is it?
Yeah.
Hey, but Matthew, you have really done superbly because you were given the Lifetime Achievement Award in Australia.
Yes,
Remember?
I'm just like I said, very lucky and fortunate. I don't
Yeah.
know how
Yep.
they select
You.
me to be that, you
Okay.
know, and to award me.
Uh-huh.
In fact, I was so surprised when they wrote to me email, and he came down. The Australian guy came down. I said, "How do you know about me?" He said, "Oh, they had people coming here, going back telling, you know, and we had, in fact, two of my original Mandarins migrated to Perth. You know, the two Eurasian brothers,
Denker?
they're living in Perth right now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep. Yep.
and when we went get the achievement award, they invited me to go down to perform and receive the award,
Yep.
and it was amazing because I just never expect that, you know. I mean, for the life of me, Australia, I thought maybe you know
Okay.
America,
Okay, that's really cool, you know. Yeah,
you know,
but not
but
only that, do you know something, you know, guys out there, you know, I mean, Mandarins, that's the name of the group, you know, they will never be off the chart scene. Even till today, you know, radio stations are still playing Matthew and the Mandarins and the very famous song, Singapore Cowboy.
in fact, Jack Neo did a movie and he used my song too, you know.
Really?
All this exposure
Uh-huh.
is very good and financially quite good also. Even Burger King, you know, Burger King. I don't know which year was it. They bought the rights
Two,
to use the song for the hamburger.
Singapore Cowboy.
Singapore Cowboy, and
Wow, Singapore
I remember
Cowboy eating
yeah,
cheeseburgers.
I signed a
Yeah,
deal for them with one year, you know,
oh, okay.
and then Singapore, I don't Singapore Press Holding or no Tourist
Okay.
Promotion Board
Tourist. Okay. Okay.
sold exposed the song to Hong Kong, and then they Hong Kong they brought us to Hong Kong to perform, you know, and it went down very well. I mean, I was really surprised that you know Hong Kong
Good.
people are you know more into Cantonese music
Cantonese.
and Mandarin songs, and then they brought us to the Hong Kong radio.
Okay.
And we did that also, and with the tourist promotion board's help, lah.
Good.
You know, in fact,
Good.
the
Yeah.
STPB did help us a lot. They brought us to Los Angeles, to
Yes.
Texas, to Oklahoma, and then to Toronto. Yeah, we
Wow.
performed
Canada.
all these places because of the tourist promotion board. You know, they feel that
Wow.
we can
Wow.
represent Singapore because
Wow.
of our ethnic you know here lah, you know, and in fact they had a big food fair in Canada, Toronto. They flew chefs from Singapore, Chinese, Malay, Indian, and all that, including us. We all went there, and Los Angeles. They were showing off their food, and then put our music in.
Wow, that's really cool. You see, the name Matthew Tan is really a name to be reckoned with. We will never forget Matthew Tan. You know how I wish I could continue talking and talking to this guy, He's really got a lot to share with us. It's such a pity, But never mind, there's still a chance for us to get back and talk to him, maybe in another program to come. But what I want to do is I want to listen to his music. Right,
Thank you.
Matthew? What are you going to play or what are you going to sing?
Well, I would be too happy to do.
Singapore Cowboy.
Sure.
Cool. Singapore Cowboy. Riding down. Come on.
Yeah.
I was born to have a world from Nashville, Tennessee, where all year long the summer breezes blow. And while my friends are flying kites and planting bonsai trees, I got high on country radio. It wasn't long before a song was born inside my heart, and soon I started singing right along. And understanding Uncle Smiling gave me my first start by listening to my Shanghai country songs. Singapore cowboy, so far from my home. Bright stars and guitars, but none of my own. Singapore cowboy, where do I belong? Singapore cowboy, another lonely song. I sang my songs in Singapore, and crazy as it seems, a distant shore kept calling after me. And 10 years from my first guitar, I gathered all my dreams, and here I am in Nashville, Tennessee. Singapore cowboy, so far from my home. Bright stars and guitars, but none of my own. Singapore cowboy, where do I belong? Won't you sing a poor cowboy another lonely song? Singapore cowboy, Singapore cowboy.
Oh, that's my favorite Singapore cowboy, Matthew Tan from
Thank
the
you.
Mandarin.
Thank you very much.
You were really good. Well, we've come to the end of our program When We Were Young, but don't forget, if you really enjoyed what you're watching, make sure you subscribe to our channel. And if you have any comments, make sure you write them down. And if there's any special artist whom you would like us to feature in the near future, make sure you write it in your comments, all right? And so on behalf of my good buddy here,
Thank you.
Matthew and me, Belinda Sunshine, we say
Bye.
goodbye.